Alright, some more Fantasia Festival quickies, let's go. Why don't we start out with the worst ones and then work our way up to the best ones? That's a good idea. The worst film I saw at Fantasia Film Festival was called Crazy Samurai Musashi. This film advertises itself as having a 77-minute, one-scene, no-cut action sequence. And in concept, that sounds pretty cool if it's handled properly, but it wasn't. First of all, the acting was not great. The costume design also felt really phony. This film did not do a great job at all at feeling authentic, as everything felt pretty artificial. The exposition felt very much like exposition. Basically, it starts out like a normally shot movie before it moves into the one-take action sequence, and as soon as it gets to that point, the camera quality gets much worse. It feels like they filmed that whole part on a GoPro, and I don't really see any reason why they had to. The combat in this movie is so unbelievably cringeworthy, and the combat is the overwhelming majority of the film. It doesn't even really feel like these sword fights were choreographed. I saw no difference between the fight scenes in this movie and watching nerds LARPing in the forest. All of their swords are way too thick and they look like they're made out of styrofoam. Almost all of the blood is CG, so when he slices someone, there's no blood on his sword and there's no hole in their clothes or anything. Throughout these fight sequences, they compensate super hard with loud music and comically loud sword impact sound effects. This movie thinks it's super fucking cool, but it's the lamest shit I've ever seen. Throughout the film, the main character gets surrounded by enemies that just decide that they don't want to attack him from behind for whatever reason. They basically just run at him in the same way over and over and over again for an hour and a half. It gets really, really repetitive. There's a point where like 6 of them run at him one at a time in a single file line with their swords raised and just get sliced in the stomach. Like either they didn't see that happen to the person right in front of them, or they just want him to slice their belly. There's also literally nothing impressive about the way it's filmed. There's even a point where there's a really obvious cut in the middle of the movie which really destroys their whole marketing gimmick. There's points where you can easily see the cameraman's shadow. None of the camera work is interesting. It's just like, yep, it's one shot kind of. We just took a GoPro and filmed a bunch of nerds LARPing in the forest, I guess. Every single character that attacks him looks like they've never held a sword in their entire life. He's basically fighting the most incompetent mercenaries of all time. There was a point where one of the guy's headbands wasn't tight enough and fell in front of his eyes, but he just kept going as though nothing was wrong. And I swear I saw the same person come back later in the movie, even though he had already died. So basically each group of mercenaries that he fights is about 20 to 40 people, and I guess they didn't want the dead bodies to be blocking the way of the fight scene, so whenever he kills one of them, instead of them dying and falling over, they just stumble out of frame. I guess this is also so they can just keep reusing the same actors throughout the film. It's only when he's down to the last 3 or 4 of them in any group that their bodies actually fall over and they die. Every other person that he kills kind of just stumbles off and disappears. It is really comically embarrassing. Every single fight scene is almost exactly the same, but the music winds up changing for absolutely no reason. It's not like the stakes are different in any of these fights. The tone of the music just keeps radically changing, pretending as though there's something that justifies the change in tone. It insists many different emotions that it does not earn in any way. What's weird about this film is that the scenes at the beginning and end that were shot normally were actually kind of competent. Like, they weren't great, but they weren't embarrassingly bad like most of this film is. I have no idea why they decided to do this whole one-take thing if none of it was impressively coordinated in the slightest. This is a uniquely bad film that I watched the entirety of because I was in awe by how bad it was. So yeah, check it out if you want to see some LARPer pretending to sword fight the worst video game NPCs of all time. And I'm giving this one a 1 out of 10. Another film I saw was The Dark and the Wicked, directed by Brian Bertino of The Strangers.
Oh my god, there's a bang at the door!
And this movie is basically just The Strangers again, kind of. The film pretends as though it's tension building without really offering anything to justify it. There's a lot of slowly walking through a house and slow zooms to nothing. Everyone talks really slow and quietly again. The main characters are a man and a woman, and they're in a house and creepy things happen to them again. Once again, we know nothing about these characters and there's no reason to relate to them. There's a lot of jump scares and really basic formulated tricks to manipulate the audience into thinking they're scared. Oh no, a bad thing is happening in the frame behind the main character, and then you cut the shot to show a different angle of the main character, and then you cut the shot again, and then they're gone! Where did they go? It's so scary! In this film, they're up against ghosts, I guess, so there's several points where the ghosts are just trolling them and then disappearing. There's points where the ghosts disappear before the main characters even see them, so why were they even there? Who was that for? Was that for the audience? Who the what? Why? Oh no, who turned the light on? on. Oh no, there's a banging at the door. Oh no, she got a phone call and then it was no one when she picked up the phone. Oh, that's so scary. There's a creepy dude that knocks on their door and tries to get them to come outside, and then the phone rings as a jump scare and they got distracted, and then they look back at the door and he's gone. Wow, that's so scary. Where'd he go? It is a really boring, terrible, cheap, basic horror movie. Eventually it does start to get a little better, believe it or not. There's a scene where the female lead, Marin Ireland, gives a great performance. She actually managed to inject some emotion into this film, and she did a pretty great job. Shortly after that, there was also a really cool reveal that was pretty disturbing. It was at this point where I was thinking, okay, well, I guess the movie is picking up finally. Just had to suffer through the whole first part, and then some cool things are happening. Nope, the movie just ends. Right as soon as things are starting to get not boring, it just ends. And there's no reason it had to end there. It was so cheap and unsatisfying. So yeah, Brian Bertino just made The Strangers again, but with ghosts this time. It was fucking awful. And I'm giving this one a 2 out of 10. Another film I saw was The Reckoning, directed by Neil Marshall. His previous works include films like The Descent, which I thought was awesome, and the Hellboy remake, which was not very good. Basically, this movie takes place during the Black Plague, and everyone is paranoid about witchcraft. Unfortunately, it does not do a very good job at feeling authentic. The female actors in this film all look way too dolled up for the time period. Oh wow, look at those perfectly plucked eyebrows. The main character feels like she belongs in Beauty and the Beast, not a horror movie. There's also some mixing issues in the first chunk of the film that made it difficult to tell what characters were saying. The music was just way too loud and overpowered them. The entire opening of this film is just way too overdramatic, and it would have been much better if it were done more subtly and in less time. The film has lots of flashbacks and even a really weirdly inappropriate sex scene flashback that serves no purpose. Like, yeah, I get it, they love each other, whatever. There's unfortunately a good amount of cheesy jump scares in the movie as well. There's a lot of weird editing choices. The logic of the characters doesn't make any sense. None of the characters are likable or interesting. It's impossible to relate to any of them. There's kind of interesting setups in the movies that don't really have any payoffs. The main character never really went through any kind of arc. All the elements of the film combined together with the terrible dialogue and mediocre acting made me feel like I was watching a subpar stage play. It was pretty lame and very forgettable. Don't watch it. And I'm giving this one a 3 out of 10. Another film I saw was called Hunted, which I honestly completely forgot about until I was going over my ratings just now. This is another horror movie, and it's really basic. It's kind of like a kidnapping and then chase someone through the forest kind of thing. The main actress is not bad at all, but it doesn't stop this from being a very annoying movie. There are points where she easily could have escaped or communicated her situation properly to someone that would have called the police, and she just decided not to. The two villains in this film are either omniscient jigsaws or the biggest idiots on the planet, depending on what the scene needs them to be. There is nothing special happening with the cinematography or shot composition. It was overall a really boringly filmed movie. Some of the gore effects in this movie were serviceable, but most of the action felt really lame. There was terrible editing that made certain moments borderline incomprehensible. There are some shitty attempts at being artsy here and there. Overall, it's just a really dumb, basic horror movie that doesn't add anything new to the already oversaturated genre. You don't really need to see this one because chances are you basically already have. And I'm giving this one a 3 out of 10. Stay tuned for some more quickies from Fantasia Film Festival. Those were the worst ones that I saw, so we'll start talking about some ones that were not as bad as this and work our way upwards. Thank you, bye.